Okay, so yeah, so in terms of your assessment yesterday, what I'm seeing so far, the pattern seems to be that you've done better on that question than on the 12th night, understandably, because 12th night we haven't looked at for a while. You have a tendency to really want to overcomplicate those 12th night questions, and you don't need to. But we're going to have some, once everybody's actually sat the paper, so we've still got block 3 to go on Tuesday, then we'll be given some detailed feedback, including model answers and including activities so that we can kind of brush up our skills, you know, particularly in terms of writing a good introduction, which a lot of you just didn't, that you didn't write an introduction, never mind a good or a bad one. But overall, you know what, I'm not discouraged. Overall, I'm thinking, yeah, I think we'll be all right. And there are certainly some students who I can see have really worked. The evidence is there, you know, rich with quotations, context worked in. So yeah, overall, I'm a pretty happy bunny. I tell you who wasn't a happy bunny, the new woman. Well, at least she wasn't until she became a happy, in fact, bunny is quite a derogatory term, isn't it? So the new woman, we're looking at the end of the 19th century, talking about the 1890s, when women across Europe and in America began to, and I mean a small minority of women, but an influential number, they were noticed, began to actively reject ideas to do with conventions of what womanhood, wifehood and motherhood were. So we're going to look at different aspects relating to this today. The format of the lesson will be that there's a bit of talk from me, I'll get some feedback from you. We're going to look at an extract from an essay by Sarah Grand in 1894, and then we're going to look at another essay that actually refers back to Sarah Grand, but that's from the 1970s, whose name's just completely gone. I want to say Linda Anderson, but that was my one of my tutors at university, so it's not her. And then we're going to end the lesson by you doing some independent work, watching the Massalit lecture on the new woman and marriage, and completing the worksheet that's on there. And then I need to set you some homework to be completed from Monday as well. Does that sound like a plan so far? She says, opening the chat. Okay, so let's have a look at our first slide, which tells us of the late Victorianism's new woman. She was youthful, she was educated, she was outspoken, and she challenged a strictly patriarchal system. I think those are all things that we know, that we're familiar with in terms of the new woman. Tell me about this image then. What else are we seeing here? How does that woman typify the new woman? Trousers. Aye, she's got trousers on. Why, as a new woman, would you want to wear trousers? She was seen as unfashionable. I don't know if fashion would have been her chief concern, if I'm honest. Often seen as quite masculine, yeah. Why would you want to wear trousers? It's very rare I wear skirts or dresses. I like wearing them. It's all right, Ellie. Remember, you are completely allowed to put your mic on as well and just talk. You don't have to just type. Advantages of trousers are a symbol of the restraints, challenges the emphasis on female beauty, good. They're more practical, they're more comfortable, aren't they? It's all about the elasticated waist for me now. Skirt or trousers, doesn't really matter. How else can we tell from this image that she's the new woman? apart from the trousers. Do you mean the two women in the picture, Daisy? I think the other one's a man. Can you move the visualizer? Because I put it there for when I've got a class, which isn't the case. And I shall now just teach from the top of my book. That's a bit better, isn't it? Okay, that's a bit more natural to face in this situation. She's not, I don't think she is smoking. I kept saying that she was, but I think there's just a little dot on the kind of sheet behind her. But it would have been that would have been part of it, that she would have smoked. And she's in command of the household, so she's observing the man do the tasks. So if you think about our pastor, what he was saying in Tuesday's lesson, where we don't want men and women to take each other's places. We want men and women to be in their own separate spheres. A man is not a woman and a woman is not a man. And her body language, Katie, you're absolutely right. You know, she's got a foot up on the chair. She's looking masculine and engaging. And you can see I've put a link there to the full article to read more. And let's have a look at this new woman. Right, what has she got? What does she have that makes her a new woman? A bike. Brilliant. So what is it about a bike? Good about it. How does that help a new woman? Self-autonomy. She's traveling. I think you can just have autonomy. I don't think you need self-autonomy. Right, so she can get out of the home. Now, I'm not saying that the woman before that was completely restricted, but she could certainly go further on a bike. She could cycle to work. Yeah, access, independence. What's the problem with a bike then? Yeah, and she can go further alone as well. What's the problem with a bike? Why did many people in society think it was not right that these women had bikes? Don't think the road laws were an issue. You mean, you think people worried they'd hurt themselves? Possibly, yeah, possibly. Where does a bike go? How do you ride a bike? Can you all ride a bike? Hope you can. No, we're not getting this one. How did women ride horses at this period, in this period? Side saddle. Why? Being uncouth? Right, because to ride a bike, you have to straddle a bike rather than sit delicately. Yeah, it's the fact that this bike is between a woman's legs. And you can't ride one. Look at her skirt, it's shorter. She might have had trousers on. So it was a bit of a threat because it allowed her to be independent, to travel further from home, perhaps go to a place of work. It gave her the opportunity to exercise. We'll link that to something that Sarah Grand says in one of her novels later on. To be fair, in Unforgiven, they ride it forward. don't know what that means. Is that in Unforgiven? Is that a film? I don't know. Harry. Now, the problem here is that all of this combined, smoking, being outside, meeting other women, riding bicycles, changing the clothing, not marrying, that is a threat to male power, because we don't like things that challenge what exists. So, hi Hannah. So that's an issue. Have I got Jessie yet? No. Okay. So that's what's going on there as well. It's a real challenge to the status quo. And as we see, so around the 1890s as well, this is a period of like social and political turbulence anyway. We're only a couple of decades away from the Great War, and certainly the run up to the Great War, you don't just go from having a peaceful Europe to oh, hey, let's all get into a spat. There were kind of conflicts popping up all over. And what we need during that is periods of stability. And the best place for stability, that starts in the home, in the domestic sphere. The mother stays in the home. She makes sure everything is harmonious. And this allows the man to go out to work, to innovate, to serve, either serve as in kind of fighting or serving God, that kind of thing. So that's why we need that stability. So let's move on and have a look now at what Sarah Grand wrote about the woman question in 1894. You'll like this. So she considers, in 1894, in the North American Review, Sarah Grand is a novelist, how we've come to this point. How have we got here? What have men been doing? And she says, well, first of all, we have seen him set up Christ as an example for all men to follow, which argues his belief in the possibility of doing so, and have not only allowed his weakness and hypocrisy in the matter to pass without comment, but until lately have not even seen the humour of his pretensions when contrasted with his practices, nor held him up to that wholesome ridicule which is a stimulating corrective. We haven't laughed at him enough when he's thought that he can actually follow in the footsteps of Christ. Man deprived us of all proper education and then jeered at us because we had no knowledge. He narrowed our outlook on life so that our view of it should be all distorted, and then declared that our mistaken impression of it proved us to be senseless creatures. He cramped our minds so that there was no room for reason in them, and then made merry at our want of logic. Our divine intuition was not to be controlled by him, but he did his best to damage it by sneering at it as an inferior feminine method of arriving at conclusions. It's kind of an early form of gaslighting. And finally, after having had his own way until he lost his head completely, he set himself up as a sort of a god and required us to worship him, and to our eternal shame be it said, we did so. Any thoughts on that? Any responses, please, before we look at the next little bit? Oh, excuse me. Where are we seeing this in Ibsen? How does it follow on from Milton? Just any thoughts at all, or any of it that you want me to go back over? Okay, you might be typing. Let's look at this last. Right, lovely. Okay, how like a woman, jeered. It reminds me when Helmer says Nora speaks and talks like a stupid child when this is his own doing for limiting her education. Right, good. So she's saying, you don't like us, or you poke fun at us because we're like this, but it's you that's withheld that from us in the first place. And like how God forbids Adam and Eve from eating from the tree of knowledge, good. And the Masoret lecture, I think it was, there's a lot of irony that men are following a religious example in such a misguided way, in the kind of way they blame women for doing. Yeah, good, good. So we're starting to see some connections. What about this next bit then? And I want you to think particularly about something here that Ibsen has said in public. It is the woman's place and pride and pleasure to teach the child, and man morally is in his infancy. There have been times when there was a doubt as to whether he was to be raised or woman was to be lowered, but we have turned that corner at last. And now woman holds out a strong hand to the child man and insists, but with infinite tenderness and pity, upon helping him up. No. Right, good. Women don't owe you pretty. Good. Come on, I'm thinking about something very, very specific that Ibsen has said on that responds to what Sarah Grand is saying there. Right, good, good. Okay, so let's have a quick look at this. This is his speech at the banquet of the Norwegian League for Women's Rights, made in 1898. And he says at the end, so everyone quotes this bit. I'm not a member. I'm not even quite clear as to just what this women's rights movement really is. To me, it has seemed a problem of mankind in general. Right? So that's what everybody focuses in on. Let's have a look at what he says at the end. The task always before my mind has been to advance our country and to give our people a higher standard. To achieve this, two factors are important. It is for the mothers, by strenuous and sustained labour, to awaken a conscious feeling of culture and discipline. This feeling must be awakened before it will be possible to lift the people to a higher plane. It is the women who shall solve the human problem. As mothers, they shall solve it, and only in that capacity can they solve it. Here lies a great task for woman. So, thank you, Holly. It's a good job I'm recording it for them then, isn't it? So, hi, Jessie. We are recording this for you. So we can see a direct link there, can't we? But what Ibsen is also advocating is that women need to be educated and informed in order to be these good mothers that can raise men. What do you think about this? Man morally is in his infancy. How could we see that might be a good quotation to use? Anyone, any thoughts? Lots of you are very quiet. She means man as in the gender, I think, not just mankind. Because of the second sentence here, that Helmer is a man trapped in the doll's house. Yeah. I mean, it does change it, doesn't it? If you, whether that's man, the sex, or mankind. I guess if it was mankind, you might put man morally is in its infancy. That would perhaps suggest that it's not man's fault either, that, you know, where he or she says, required us to worship him and to our eternal shame, we did, that there's been a complicity on the part of women as well. Do we see Nora ever kind of acknowledging that? Although Nora is the doll, Tarval is equally naive in him being the controller, with a greater force above controlling him. Oh, excuse me. Time for a copy. And in the tarant, go on, Ellie, what do you mean about the tarantella? Yes, so, right, Hannah, so it's ironic, you know, if Tarval's in his moral infancy, who's he to question Nora's kind of beliefs? Dowling, that's it. Okay. Do you know what I think I want to do is I want to drop that into here before I forget Ibsen's speech. So not forget. Why are you going full screen on me? Okay, so here is Linda Dowling, not Anderson. Oh, sorry, a couple more comments. Tarantella underscores Nora's voluntary return to patriarchy. Wouldn't be a return because she hasn't left it, but an acceptance, perhaps. And Tarval has he does have morals, Bethany, but are they his own set of morals? Are they just the morals of society that he's just kind of unthinkingly going along with? And I think that's what Nora's challenging, you know, and she's like, is it a sin to save my husband's life? And he's like, yeah, it is actually, which it isn't. And that's what could be meant by a moral infancy, when you just accept the morals around you, even if they are wrong. Okay, let's have a look at Linda Dowling, and let's think here about what's got, so she's writing in the 70s, and she's looking back at the new woman at the end of the century. And she's reviewing how people were a bit panicked, a little bit kind of worried. Sorry. I've got no excuse either. I had a really good night's sleep. No bad dreams. Nothing. If we smile at the repeated warnings of apocalypse made by critics of the new woman, we nonetheless recognise a genuinely anguished expression of cultural anxiety, a sense that the new might betoken cultural changes. So even though we look back now and we're like, oh, what was all the fuss about? We've got to accept that they were genuinely worried. And often there's an anxiety anyway with fin de siècle, with the end of one century, because even though we're moving into a new one, there's still, what will be lost is often worried about in kind of counted with what will be gained by a new century. And of course, as I've said, at the end of the 1890s, a lot of turbulence across Europe. So she uses the example of Sarah Grand's book, The Heavenly Twins, which I'm now desperate to get my hands on a copy of. It's a vast book. I'm not liking, I've read a lot of big books this year. I'm after some little novellas, although I've just started rereading The Rainbow. So her book, The Heavenly Twins, became one of the most widely read of the New Woman novels. It portrayed her heroine as a woman with a potential for anarchic violence, Angelica, who, by masquerading as her own twin brother, we've got shades of Twelfth Night here, has enjoyed the sexually disinterested friendship of a handsome young musician. So, in this novel, rather than seeing a woman take on a male persona in order to get access to men for any romantic involvement, it frees her to actually put sex and love aside and just have a friendship. And this is how she justifies her actions after she's been found out. And I want you to think about this as an analogy that you could paraphrase for an essay. I had the ability to be something more than a young lady, fiddling away her time on useless trifles, but I was not allowed to apply it systematically. And ability is like steam, a great power when properly applied, a great danger otherwise. This is the explosion. She looks around her disordered room and down at her masculine clothing. So that takes us back to the idea of the bike even just being a good outlet for kind of the physical steam that would build up in women, particularly, middle-class women, not your working-class women who are just shattered from the physical grind of work. But if you've got a few servants, if you're not expected to do housework, you don't have any meaningful employment for your brain, how many of you like to do physical exercise just as a counter to what your brain's been doing all day? It was great fun when Nora was working, yeah, but she's only able to do it secretly. Good. She enjoys being part of that man's world, but because of her lack of education and experience, even though she's knowledgeable enough to take on the loan, she doesn't quite understand the terms. In fact, she doesn't know how much she's paid back, which to us is how, what? She hasn't been keeping track of it with the interest, etc. So I like that analogy that women's ability, if it is like steam building up in a machine, and if it isn't properly applied for good, it's going to explode outwards. And I think that's the way that you can quote from Graham's novel in your essay, because that's almost what we see, that trajectory is what we see of Nora as she, she's recognised some of her ability when she was given the opportunity to work. So like the steam was allowed out a bit at that point. But now she sees that she's going to be trapped, and she's not only trapped by the loan, but she's also trapped by the recognition that her husband cannot see her as the person that she was when she was working. And so that outlet becomes the slamming of the door. What do you think of that? Yeah, Tarval's bored because he's left on his own. Poor Tarval. And yet, when he wants to shut himself in the office, that's just unquestioned, isn't it? That's just, be quiet, I'm in the office. Problem with these remote lessons is there's too much sitting down. Any other thoughts on that? And then it goes on to give a few examples from other new women in texts. Jude the Obscure is a book I haven't read for a very long time, but I'd like to go back now and consider Sue Brideshead as a new woman. Not me as a new woman, but Sue Brideshead as a new Bridehead, sorry. Any thoughts? Harry, you've been particularly quiet. Anyone? Christine working, it isn't questioned at all by Tarval, but is it because he doesn't see her as physically attractive? Yeah, okay, so what he does notice her working. What he has a conversation with her about something to do with her work. It is something about sewing. What is it? Yeah, well, let's go back to this sewing bit. Knitting is an ugly business. Right. Go on, tell me about that. There's places only for mothers, right? Go on, tell me about this sewing and knitting thing. Yeah, he does want her to help with the dress. It's to do with knitting being ugly. When you see a woman knitting, which is not how I knit. Duncan says he's blinded by aesthetic preferences. She's not wrong. Yeah, typical woman's labour. What's the difference between knitting and sewing? If you're a woman in this era, and I'm not on about dressmaking, I'm on about needlework. What are you doing if it's needlework? Yeah, Emily, you like 99% of the way there. It's dainty and delicate. It's for an aesthetic purpose. You may be making a sampler, a cross-stitch picture. You know, you're doing cross-stitch of the Lord's Prayer or something that's going to go on the wall. Knitting would usually be to make clothing or blankets or something functional, something it has a utilitarian function, doesn't it? He doesn't want to see that. He doesn't want to see that. So he wants to see his wife occupied, but in something that's going to produce a pleasing end result, like she is. So the value of women's work. And yet, if we think about Christine, there's a lot of value in the work that she's done and the experiences it's led her to, isn't there? Okay. So what you're going to do for the remainder of the lesson is you're going to watch the Massalit lecture on marriage and the new woman. And you're going to complete the worksheet, and that needs bringing in next week. Or if you're going to type up your notes or something, you can share that with me. And then thinking ahead to next week, we're going to be looking at Nora, Christine, and Sin. So I want you to make sure, you know, when I gave you the Satan character question, and I said, here's like a template that you can use. I want you to have completed those for Nora, Sin, and Christine, please. And I will. Oh, so all of this, the slideshow's already there. I'll post the video as well, so you can watch it back. And I'll write in your homework as well to remind you that that's what you need to do. Okay, I'll stop recording now.